Welcome to MGD 111. We're going to look at some advanced selection tools here today. So we have a photo called glove.jpg. It's an inflatable chicken made out of a surgical glove. Very cute. We're going to take a look at some tools here. Let's just refresh here. We've looked at the marquee tools, we've looked at the lasso tools, and we looked at the quick selection and magic wand tools. What we're going to look at today is actually under the selection menu. So we hit select and go to color range. And what it's going to do is it's going to look for a particular range that we pick out of this list here. Let's, for instance, take a look at cyan. Now, when we click on the cyan button here, you'll see that we get this black and white little thumbnail here. What's that trying to do? Well, it's showing us what part of the picture is selected or not. The lighter colors are in the selection area, the dark colors are not. If I were to click OK, you'll see that we have an actual selection of marching ants / marquee. Now, it's kind of fuzzy and there's a lot of specks up here. Why didn't it pick this stuff up here? There's probably a lot of cyan in the sky, right? Well, in these darker areas of the sky, there's also a lot of probably yellow and or magenta and or black too. And so it's looking for areas that are predominantly cyan. Even though this looks very blue, it may contain a lot of other colors. So sometimes this is a really good tool to use, sometimes not. But let's deselect, and it's important we need to keep deselecting every time we go back to this menu for now, because if we tried to select something else, it would select just from what we had selected in that step. Let's go to select, color range, and let's go to sampled colors. Now you can see it's selecting a pretty wide area here, but why is it selecting that particular range? Well, the sampled color that it's looking for is over here. It's the foreground color. So that's what it's looking for. Now the cool thing about this tool is, notice how my cursor looks like an arrow when I'm in this menu, but if I go over the picture, it becomes the eyedropper. So I can select a color from this picture and it will look for that color range. The other cool thing is when we use sampled colors, we have a chance to adjust the fuzziness of the selection. The fuzziness basically works a lot like the tolerance level in the magic wand, in that it's looking for pixels of a similar color range. Why they don't call it tolerance, I'm not really sure. One of those weird inconsistencies of the program, but the more tolerant you are, the more fuzzy the picture, the more pixels it's going to select. So let's click cancel, and let's go to select, color range, and finally let's try the highlights, midtones, and shadows. If I select highlights, you can see it's trying to select the light colored areas. That makes sense. If I select shadows, it's selecting the very dark areas. But if I select midtones, it's looking for the things that are sort of halfway in between. Now, let's say I wanted to select not the highlights, but everything but the highlights. Well, everything but the highlights includes midtones and shadows. That's two areas for me to sample. Cool thing about the color range tool is we have this invert button here. Watch what happens to my selection. It's selecting the light areas right now. If I click invert, now it's selecting the opposite of that. Pretty cool, huh? So that way it's selecting 2 out of 3 areas instead of the others. And that's why I like using the highlights, midtones, and shadows. I use any of those other versions because some of those give you some very unpredictable results. But notice what happens if we alter the fuzziness again. We get more or fewer pixels depending on how we're doing that. So I'm going to click OK here. Highlights, invert. Oops! I actually meant to select the other part. Oh no, what did I do? I didn't mean to have the invert button on. Well, I have 2 options. I can go back there, deselect the invert button and try it again, or I can go up to select, inverse, and it will flip the selection from what it was. It might have been a little hard to see there, but now it's selecting the highlights own tool, and that we can modify the picture in many different ways once we have that selection made. The other thing too is when I have an area selected, sometimes I will use my magic wand or I'll use my lasso to refine that selection. So let's deselect for now, and we will come back to this in a little bit. So save your work with the deselections off, and we'll use this in the next step.